Hello, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Guest from Aspie Dent, and today we're going to talk about rigid thinking. By the end of this presentation, you should have an idea as to the different ways that rigid thinking can occur in autism. So we're going to look at, first of all, what is rigid thinking? And then we have different ways that rigid thinking can kind of manifest itself within autism. And then finally we're going to look at single-mindedness, which actually has nothing to do with autism, but it's a useful subject to cover. So what is rigid thinking? People who have rigid thinking or appear to have rigid thinking are unable to consider alternative ways of solving a problem. So they come up with one solution and they're probably not good at problem solving in the first place. They can't see a situation from different viewpoints. They're just stuck with what they've got, and they react with fear or hostility to unexpected changes or challenges. And the problem is that an autistic person may well react in a way that looks like rigid thinking, even though it doesn't actually reflect their style of thinking. But there are autistic people who do have a very rigid way of thinking that is their native way or native style of thinking. These people tend to be very concrete in their thinking. They're unable to cope with abstract concepts. So if you consider maths, for example, they can cope with addition and subtraction and multiplication and division and all that kind of stuff. But as soon as you move into algebra, where numbers get replaced by letters, it becomes a lot more abstract and then they flounder. And this can cause a lot of problem because they appear to be good at maths to a certain extent, then it all falls over. People who are rigid thinking tend to be very detailed thinkers. They see the pieces, but they don't always not very good at seeing the bigger picture. And I've added linear thinking in there because you get people who kind of plan out their day or even plan out their life in a very linear way. I'm going to do this, then this, then this, then this. And if there's a hiccup in the middle of it, you throw them completely. And the reason that you throw them completely is because they can't see, well, if I move this bit over here and that bit over there, then it'll all work again. They need a bit of help to be able to do that because they have to actually start from where they are and replan it out from scratch, which obviously takes a lot longer. Now, the thing with people who have a rigid style of thinking is they can actually be reasoned with if you know how. It requires a lot of patience. You really need to take into account how they think, so keep things concrete. Focus on the detail. Don't expect them to see the bigger picture. Don't get annoyed with them when they can't see the bigger picture. But relate it very much to them. We have found it useful if you concentrate on the positives of what's going on, so that then they can make it themselves and they incorporate it then as their own goal. And then you're much more likely to get them sort of going along with it and less distressed. Now, there are autistic people who appear to have rigid thinking when you talk to them, but if you give them it in writing and send them away with it, or you give them time to process what's going on, or then they actually don't have a rigid style of thinking. And many autistic people who are actually very creative think in this kind of way or have this kind of problem. And the problem is difficulty processing incoming verbal information. So what happens is they might be able to process it, but it only gets processed for the literal meaning of those words, of that sentence, of that paragraph. They can't in real time fully process the context or the implications of what you've just said. They also cannot process the information relating to your emotion, whether it's to your emotion or whether it's their own emotion. But they will react, and you might get quite a big reaction. there's a key to this, and that is give people time to process. Ignore the initial reaction and tell them to go away and think about it. It might take a few days. It might help to write things down for them or to draw a picture or a diagram so that they've got something to refer to. Something else you could try would be to take things very slowly during the conversation to actually give them time to process. It's important to stay calm and try to help them think through the implications, the wider context. But again, you might still have to send them away to think about it. The final way we're going to look at today is tunnel interest. Autistic people with tunnel interest have a very restricted interest into which they go in quite detail. They become experts on the topic or few topics that they're interested in. And there's little or no interest in anything outside these. So you might have an autistic person who's fixated on cars, or bits of plumbing, or maps, or dinosaurs. It could be anything. Because they're only interested in a few things, it means they gain a very incomplete understanding of the world. It's very piecemeal. And that means that they can't draw connections between different concepts, or even the same concept in different scenarios. The key thing you have to do with this is basically to help them widen their interests. So you start by linking everything to their interests. So if they're really keen on cars, see if you can get them interested in who's driving the cars, who owns the cars. Because some cars are family friendly and other ones aren't. Some cars might be designed better for people with dogs. If you're dealing with maps, then look at what happened in the various locations on the maps. What goes on in those places? Where people travel to and why? So it's actually, once you get into the idea of it, it's actually quite easy to widen those interests to interrelated interests, to give people a more broader understanding of the world. But also you can still allow people to go deep within their interests. And that's actually a good idea because it might provide the way to a future career. But create flexible thinking within the interests. Promote creative thinking, problem solving within that interest. Now, single-mindedness has got nothing to do with autism, although some autistic people do exhibit it, or do have it. Plenty of non-autistic people that exhibit single-mindedness too. Now, single-mindedness isn't always a bad thing, because people who are determined to follow through on a course of action, irrespective of what people say, they can actually be very successful. Many entrepreneurs or inventors have just followed through on an idea and kept trying and kept trying and kept trying, and eventually they get there, and some of them become millionaires. It can also work for a career. A child may want to have their heart set on being a brain surgeon. Now, as long as they've got the inherent ability and the determination to see it through, there's no reason why they shouldn't be. But it does take determination and stickability to get there. And without quite a large dose of single-mindedness, you won't get there. A less useful aspect of single-mindedness is where people refuse to change their beliefs, despite all the evidence to the contrary. I.e., they just cannot be reasoned with. They've got a fixed idea. I suppose the area where this is most obvious is in politics, where you have two parties and they just don't seem to be able to find a way of coming together because they view things through the lens through which they were brought up, through their education, and they find it very difficult to see things from the point of view of somebody from a completely different background. And that's not just politicians, that can apply to anyone. So thank you for watching. If you've got any questions, any feedback, please add them to the comment section.